A guy calls his wife from vacation. She picks up. He says, "Don't answer the phone if it says Charles Schwab." She says, "Why not?" He says, "Because I just gave them our entire retirement account." True story. Happened last year. $240,000 gone in 4 minutes. Another one. A woman in Phoenix gets a text from her bank. Fraud alert. Click here to verify. She clicks. 30 seconds later, her account balance shows 0. The bank tells her they're not liable because she authorized the transaction. She didn't authorize anything. She just clicked the link. One more. A retired couple in Florida gets a call. Caller ID says Bank of America. The voice on the other end sounds professional, polite, says there's suspicious activity, needs to verify their identity. Can they read back the 6-digit code they just received? They do. 3 minutes later, their savings account is empty. $460,000. Now here's the question. What do all these people have in common? They're not stupid. They're not senile. They're just following what looks like normal procedure. And that's exactly why this scam works. I'm going to explain how this specific con game operates, why banks are legally protected when you fall for it, and what changed in the financial system over the last decade that turned this from a rare occurrence into a multi-billion-dollar annual problem. Because the uncomfortable truth is this. The system isn't designed to protect your money anymore. It's designed to protect the bank's liability. And once you understand how that shift happened, you'll see why traditional security advice is basically worthless. Think of your bank account like a vault with 2 doors. There's the front door, that's your username and password, and there's the back door, that's the 2-factor authentication code, the 6-digit number they text you. Now, for years, banks told us that 2-factor authentication made accounts basically unhackable. And technically, they were right. If someone steals your password, they still can't get in without that code. The problem is, they don't need to steal anything. They just need you to give it to them. And this is where the metaphor gets important because I'm going to keep coming back to it. The scam isn't picking the lock. It's convincing you to open the door. Here's how it actually works. Step 1. The scammer gets your phone number and the name of your bank. This isn't hard. Data breaches happen constantly. In 2023 alone, there were over 3,000 reported data breaches in the United States. Your information is probably already out there, multiple times. Step 2, they spoof the caller ID. This means when they call you, your phone displays the real name of your bank. Not a random number, not something suspicious. It says Bank of America, or Charles Schwab, or Fidelity. Your phone is lying to you, but you don't know that. Step 3, they create urgency. This is the psychological trigger. They tell you there's fraud on your account. Someone is trying to wire money out right now. You need to act immediately. Every second counts. Your brain goes into fight or flight mode. And when you're in that state, you don't think clearly. You react. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The scammer doesn't ask for your password. That would be suspicious. Instead, they say they need to verify your identity. And to do that, the bank is going to send you a security code. Just read it back to confirm you're really you. Sounds reasonable, right? Except what's actually happening is the scammer is on your bank's website trying to log in. They already have your username and password from some previous data breach. The only thing they need is that 2-factor authentication code, and you're about to give it to them. So the code arrives, your phone buzzes, you get a text message, and here's the critical moment. The text message literally says, "Do not share this code with anyone, even if they claim to be from your bank." You read that, and then you read the code out loud to the person on the phone who claims to be from your bank. Why? Because your brain is still in panic mode. You're not processing the warning. You're just following instructions. The moment you say that code out loud, it's over. The scammer types it in, they're in your account, and the first thing they do is set up a wire transfer. Not to some suspicious overseas account, to a domestic bank, often one they've set up with a fake ID. The wire goes out same day. By the time you realize what happened, the money is already gone. And when you call your actual bank, they tell you they're not liable because technically you authorized the transaction. You gave them the authentication code. Let me tell you about a guy I knew who ran a small business back in the 2000s. He kept about $100,000 in his business checking account. One day he gets a call. Caller ID says his bank. The person on the phone says there's been a fraudulent charge. They need to verify it's really him. Can he confirm the last 4 digits of his social? He does. Can he confirm his date of birth? He does. Great. Now they're going to send him a code to make sure his phone number is up to date. Just read it back. He does. 5 minutes later, his entire business account is empty. The bank tells him they're not refunding it. He filed a police report, nothing happened. He filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, nothing happened. He hired a lawyer. The lawyer told him he'd spend more on legal fees than he'd ever recover, so he just ate the loss. His business didn't survive. Now you might be thinking, okay, but this is just a few isolated cases, people who weren't paying attention. And look, to be fair, I thought the same thing until I saw the numbers. The Federal Bureau of Investigation puts out an annual report called the Internet Crime Report. In 2024, they recorded losses from investment fraud and business email compromise that totaled over $5.6 billion. Just those 2 categories. And that's only reported cases. Most people don't report these scams because they're embarrassed. They think it's their fault. The FBI estimates the real number is probably 3 to 4 times higher. So we're talking about somewhere between $15 and $20 billion per year. And here's the thing, the banks aren't losing this money, you are. Because the legal framework that governs electronic funds transfers puts the liability on you the moment you provide authentication credentials. There's a law called the Electronic Fund Transfer Act, passed in 1978, back when electronic transfers meant ATM cards. The law says if someone steals your card and uses it, the bank is liable. But if you voluntarily give someone your PIN, you're liable. Made sense in 1978, made sense in 2000, doesn't make sense now. Because the definition of voluntarily has been stretched so far, it's meaningless. If a scammer tricks you into reading a code, the bank's position is you voluntarily provided authentication. Doesn't matter that you were deceived. Doesn't matter that the caller ID was spoofed. Doesn't matter that you thought you were talking to the bank. You said the code out loud. That's authorization. Case closed. Now you're asking yourself, why don't banks fix this? And this is where the incentive structure gets really dark, because fixing it would cost them money, a lot of money. Think about what would have to change. First, they'd need to make caller ID spoofing impossible. Can't be done. The phone system wasn't built for security. It was built in the 1960s for convenience. Fixing it would require rebuilding the entire telecom infrastructure. Cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Who pays? Not the banks. Second, they'd need to make authentication codes meaningless to scammers. This is actually possible. Instead of a code you read out loud, you could have a code that only works inside the bank's app, or a physical token, or biometric verification that can't be spoofed. But rolling that out to millions of customers, expensive. And here's the kicker. The banks have already done the math. The amount they'd spend on better security is more than the amount they're losing to fraud, because they're not losing anything. You are. When your account gets drained, the bank's balance sheet doesn't change. Your balance goes down, but their assets are fine. The money went to another bank account somewhere. That bank still has it. The total amount of money in the banking system hasn't changed. It's just been redistributed from you to a criminal. The bank doesn't care. They have no financial incentive to fix this. Actually, it's worse than that. They have an incentive not to fix it. Because if they implement better security, it makes banking slightly less convenient. Maybe you have to carry a physical token. Maybe you have to use their app instead of just getting a text. Maybe authentication takes an extra 30 seconds. And in the banking world, convenience is everything. Every extra step in the process costs them customers. So they run the numbers. Lose a few customers to scams, or lose a lot of customers to inconvenience. The math says, let the scams happen. This isn't conspiracy. This is just incentives. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every time a bank tells you they take your security seriously, what they mean is they take their liability seriously. Two-factor authentication isn't there to protect you, it's there to protect them. Because the moment you read that code out loud, they're off the hook. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out in dollars. Say you're 55 years old. You've got $800,000 in a brokerage account. You've been saving for 20 years. You're planning to retire in 5 years. You get the call. Caller ID says your brokerage firm, they say, someone in Romania is trying to wire out $200,000. You need to stop it right now. They send you a code. You read it back. The scammer now has full access to your account. First thing they do is change your email address so you won't get notifications. Second thing they do is change your phone number so you can't get authentication codes to change it back. Third thing they do is initiate a wire transfer. Not for $200,000, for all of it, $800,000. They send it to 3 different banks, split it up, harder to trace. By the time you realize what happened, maybe 3 hours later, the money has already been moved again. From those 3 banks to 6 more, then to crypto exchanges, then to foreign accounts. It's gone. You call your brokerage firm. They say they're very sorry. They'll open an investigation. 2 weeks later, they send you a letter. It says that based on their review, you provided valid authentication credentials. Therefore, the transfer was authorized. They're not liable. You can file a complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission. You can file a police report. You can hire a lawyer. None of it will bring your money back. You're 55 years old. You just lost $800,000. You're not retiring in 5 years. You're working until you're 70, if you're lucky. This is the part where someone always says, "But Mark, people just need to be smarter." Don't give out codes. Problem solved. And look, I get it. Personal responsibility matters. But here's the thing. These scams work because they exploit how human brains actually function, not how we think they should function. Let me tell you a story. There was a psychologist in the 70s named Daniel Kahneman, won a Nobel Prize later. He spent his career studying how people make decisions under pressure. And what he found is that human brains have 2 systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional. It's what kicks in when you're scared. System 2 is slow, deliberate, rational. It's what you use when you're doing math or reading contracts. The problem is, System 1 always wins when there's urgency. You can't think your way out of a panic response. You can only train yourself ahead of time to recognize it, and most people haven't done that training. So when the scammer creates urgency, your System 1 takes over. And System 1 doesn't read warning labels. It just reacts. The scammer knows this. This is why they always create urgency. It's not an accident. It's the core of the scam. Here's another angle on this. A few years ago, I was talking to a guy who used to work in fraud prevention at a major bank. He told me something that stuck with me. He said the bank's fraud detection systems are actually very good. They can spot suspicious transactions in real time, but they don't stop them. They just flag them. Because if they stopped every suspicious transaction, they'd also stop a lot of legitimate ones. And customers hate that. You're on vacation, you try to use your card, it gets declined, you call the bank. You're furious. The bank gets a complaint. Do that enough times, customers leave. So the bank optimized for convenience. They let transactions go through. And if it turns out to be fraud, they deal with it after. Unless you're the one who authorized it, then it's your problem. This guy told me the internal metrics at his bank showed they could cut fraud by about 40% if they implemented stricter real-time controls. But customer satisfaction would drop by 15%. So they didn't do it. Customer satisfaction was more important than fraud prevention, because fraud, from the bank's perspective, is mostly your problem, not theirs. Now, here's another story. There's a guy in his early 60s, retired military, not wealthy, but comfortable. Has about $400,000 saved up. Gets a call one day. Caller ID says the Social Security Administration. They tell him his Social Security number has been compromised. Someone in Texas is using it to open credit cards. There's a warrant out for his arrest. He's thinking, this doesn't sound right. But the person on the phone sounds official, knows his full name, knows his address, knows the last 4 digits of his Social Security number. So maybe it's real. They tell him the only way to clear this up is to move his money into a secure government account, temporarily. Just until the investigation is complete. He says he wants to call back. They say if he hangs up, the warrant goes active. Police will show up at his door. He's scared. He's confused. And here's the thing. He's not stupid. He's a veteran. He served in Iraq. He's made life or death decisions under pressure. But this is different. This isn't a firefight. This is a phone call. And his brain isn't wired to recognize this type of threat. So he does what they say. He wires the money. $400,000, gone. When he realizes what happened, he doesn't tell anyone for weeks. He's ashamed. He thinks it's his fault. Eventually, he tells his wife. She convinces him to file a police report. Nothing comes of it. The money went to accounts in 3 different states, then overseas. It's gone forever. He's 62 years old. He thought he was done working. Now he's looking for a job. The pattern here is always the same. The scammer creates urgency. The victim's rational brain shuts down. They follow instructions. And by the time they realize what happened, it's too late. The money is gone. And the institutions that could prevent this, the banks, the brokerage firms, the phone companies, they've all decided it's not their problem. It's yours. And here's the really dark part. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Because the tools available to scammers keep improving. 10 years ago, spoofing a caller ID was hard. You needed special equipment, special software. Now there are apps that do it. You can spoof any number you want from your smartphone. 5 years ago, voice cloning was science fiction. Now you can clone someone's voice with 10 seconds of audio. There are scammers who call elderly people, play a recording of their grandchild saying, "Grandma, I'm in trouble," and then ask for money. The voice is AI generated, but it sounds exactly like their grandchild. How do you defend against that? You can't. Not with common sense, not with vigilance. The only defense is to understand the system. And the system is designed to make you vulnerable. Here's what I mean by that. The entire structure of modern banking is built on the idea that convenience equals profit. The easier it is to move money, the more money moves. And the more money moves, the more fees banks collect. So every innovation in banking over the last 20 years has been about making transactions faster and easier. Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, instant wire transfers, real-time payments. All of it is designed to move money as quickly as possible. And that's great when you're the one moving it. It's terrible when someone else is. Because once the money is gone, it's gone. There's no getting it back. In the old days, if you wrote a check, you had a few days before it cleared. If you realized it was fraud, you could stop payment. Now, money moves in seconds. By the time you realize what happened, it's already in another account, probably another country. The speed that makes banking convenient is the same speed that makes fraud irreversible. And the banks know this. They just don't care. Because again, it's not their money, it's yours. Let me hit you with one more thing. There's a concept in security called the human element. It means that no matter how good your technology is, humans are always the weakest link. You can have the best encryption in the world, the best firewalls, the best authentication systems. But if a human can be tricked into giving up their credentials, none of it matters. And humans can always be tricked. Always. Because we're social animals. We're wired to trust. We're wired to follow authority. We're wired to respond to urgency. These aren't bugs. They're features. And scammers exploit them. So when people say, just don't give out your codes, what they're really saying is, just stop being human. It's not a solution. It's victim blaming. Now, does this mean you're helpless? No. But it does mean you need to understand that the traditional advice is useless. Be vigilant. Don't trust strangers. Verify before you act. All of that assumes you'll recognize the threat, but you won't. Because the threat is designed to look like something safe. The caller ID says your bank, the email looks official, the voice sounds professional, your brain is telling you this is legitimate. So you need a different strategy. You need rules, hard rules. Rules that don't depend on you recognizing a threat in the moment, because you won't. Not reliably, not when you're scared. Not when you're in a hurry. Not when you're on vacation and you just want this problem to go away. Here's a story that illustrates this. I know a guy who's a cybersecurity consultant. His entire job is protecting companies from hackers. He knows every scam, every tactic, every trick, and he still almost fell for one. He got an email that looked like it was from his bank. Said there was suspicious activity. Click here to review. He hovered over the link, checked the URL. It looked legitimate. He clicked. The page looked exactly like his bank's website. He started to type in his username, and then he stopped. Not because he recognized it was a scam, but because he has a rule. Never click links in emails. Always go directly to the website by typing the URL yourself. That rule saved him, not his expertise, not his vigilance. Just a simple rule he follows every time. That's the level of defense you need. Not awareness, not caution, rules. So let me give you 3 rules. Not advice, rules. Rule number 1, never, ever, under any circumstances, give a 6-digit authentication code to someone who called you. Even if the caller ID says it's your bank, even if they sound official, even if they know your account number. If someone calls you asking for a code, hang up. Then call the bank yourself using the number on the back of your card. Not the number they gave you, the number you already have. This rule is non-negotiable. No exceptions, ever. Rule number 2, if anyone creates urgency around your money, that is the scam. Real banks don't create urgency. If there's actual fraud on your account, they'll lock it. You'll call them when you're ready. They won't call you demanding immediate action. Urgency is always, always, always the tell. The moment you feel rushed, hang up. Rule number 3, assume every call, every email, every text about your accounts is fake until you verify it yourself. Not by calling back the number they gave you, not by clicking the link they sent, by going directly to the institution's website or calling the number you already have. This sounds paranoid. It sounds exhausting, but it's the only thing that works because the scams are too good now. You can't spot them in real time. You can only refuse to play the game. Now, let me be clear about something. None of this is your fault. The system is rigged against you. The banks have offloaded their security costs onto you. The phone companies won't fix caller ID spoofing because it's expensive. The government hasn't updated the laws because the banks lobby against it. You're trying to defend yourself with rules written in 1978 against attacks invented in 2024. It's not a fair fight, but it's the fight you're in. So you can either complain about it or adapt. And adapting means understanding that what 99% of people do is usually what not to do. 99% of people trust caller ID, don't. 99% of people read codes out loud when asked, don't. 99% of people think their bank will protect them. It won't. Once you accept that, you can actually protect yourself. Not by being smarter, not by being more careful, but by having rules that don't require you to make decisions in the moment. Because the moment is when you lose. The uncomfortable truth is this: your life savings can disappear in seconds. Not because you're careless, not because you're naive, but because the entire financial system has decided that protecting you is less profitable than making transactions convenient. And until that changes, you're on your own. So take those 3 rules seriously. Write them down. Share them with people you care about. Because the next call might be the one. And when it comes, you won't have time to think. You'll only have time to follow the rules. Or lose everything. Your choice.